I'm in the kind of intersection between being a design practitioner. So I lead the systemic design efforts at Designit, which is a global design agency with over 500 Designits worldwide. And I'm in the Oslo studio, which we are about 60, and we do all sorts of design projects in the public, private, kind of non-for-profit sectors. And I work also as an associate professor in service design at AHU. But I'm also a mom, a partner. Yeah, you can see there, like, it's like all this multiplicity of roles that we bring into life. And these are just my kind of professional roles. And as Guillermina kind of tried to cover, I'm from Chile, neighboring country to where Guillermina and Jorge are from. But I've been in Norway a lot of my life, but from Norway kind of moving to the US, to Canada, where we actually met Guillermina.
Yeah.
But I kind of have always come back to Norway and connected to AHU. So now I wanted to know a little bit about you. So I'll take away the full screen mode. So if you can just pick a black square and double click on it, and you can write your name and your kind of design year that you're in. That would be great. And let's just see it happening. Cool. So third year, lots of third year, first year. This is working. I'm super excited to have like more interactivity in presentations. And as you are doing it, you can see at the bottom some color codes. If you would kind of color code where you think your design interests is, or what your kind of the courses that you're taking on now, or where your passion lies, if would be great. So I see some purple ones and some pink ones and some yellow. Great. It might be very hard to choose one color because the kind of the fields of design are so intertwined, but this is nice to see. Great. I'm just you can continue doing it. I'm gonna move back into full screen mode. Presentation mode, yes. Oh, and I'm gonna bring you all to me. So, do you see the presentation mode again? Does it work? Yes. Nice. Super lovely to see the diversity, and I just wanted to connect it to the next map. This is a positioning map, and I have the reference just down here from Kirsten's Moerglein's PhD thesis, which is called Designing in Transition Towards Intimacy in Global Uncertainty. So I'll just bring you to me so you don't get lost. And what I really love about this map, one is that it's visually super beautiful, but it shows different design disciplines in transition, and many of them transition from object-oriented design towards people-centered design, and the ones most far on the right, which is kind of transition design, indigenous design, regenerative design, much more earth focus. So kind of taking away the strong focus that we have had on humans over the past 20, 30 years and trying to move into earth-centered. And as I look at my own kind of design career, it's also been quite kind of intertwined. So I'm trained as an industrial designer, also with kind of, I studied in Chile something that was called integrated design. So we're looking at industrial design, product design, communication design, experience design. And then I came to Norway to specialize in industrial design. And then I started kind of hinting at systemic design. Then moving to the US, where I worked with healthcare innovation, very much kind of patient-centered, so user-centered design or patient-centered design. Back to Norway, where I started my PhD, which was very kind of a systemic approach, but very much into social systems design. So large part of my career has been people oriented, and I would kind of like to be more also understand how we can bring the agency of non-human or non-living kind of beings into our design or co-design processes. I still haven't figured out how to do it, but that's kind of a area that I'm very, very interested in exploring farther next. Is everyone following the presentation, or should I bring anyone to me just in case someone has lost? I'll just do it. Yes. So back to the focus of today. I want to bring in a systemic design perspective from an author that I think is quite unknown in the design world. His name is Bela Banathy. He's Hungarian, but he worked a lot in the US. And his ideas of how to actually build a design culture and a co-designing community and the whole kind of design process. And I think a lot of it will sound very familiar in how we understand today, but I think it's nice to rescue some of his legacy because it's not cited a lot. And then I will try to apply his work into a case that I did in Vancouver, where I met Guillermina and Jorge, where we designed a program to build co-design capacities in the social sector, in particular with disability or agencies that work with people with disabilities. So yeah, this is Bela Banathy. And he's one of the founders of the social systems design field. And this is one of his quotes. I'll just read it. I have become increasingly convinced that even if people fully develop their potential, they cannot give direction to their lives, they cannot forge their destiny, they cannot take charge of their future, unless they also develop competence to take part directly and authentically in the design of the systems in which they live and work and reclaim the right to do so. This is what true empowerment is about. And this is from his book, Designing Social Systems in a Changing World from 1996. And again, he reflects that today we empower our political representatives who make decisions for us, but his future vision is if we develop a design or a co-design culture, then democracy, meaning power to the people, will become a reality in the form of a truly participative, creating and designing society. So I think this is quite a powerful vision, because today as citizens, we participate a lot with our voice and our agency, but we still interact with most systems designed by others, and by others meaning many times guided by those, of course, in power that we, of course, elect. But still, there's always a disconnect between what happens in our lives on the ground with the feedback kind of loop into policy systems. So when he talks about this design culture, he brings it from a very kind of systemic design perspective, which brings the kind of the world of systems with authors like Peter Checkland, Ulrich, Beer, Christakis, and design with many of the authors that you probably have, that you're most familiar with. But for him, he kind of in his book also distinguishes the design culture from the arts and sciences culture. But for him, design is kind of this kind of also kind of integrative or gluing perspective that embraces every modality of human experience that aims at the creation of novel phenomena. And it's manifested in the human action of bringing to life what we believe should be. So there's a huge kind of normative motive in this. And there's 3 approaches that I want to share with you for design that he kind of reflects upon. The first one is the first generation of design, which is designing for others. That was predominant in the 50s and 60s, dominated by the idea that the designer is the expert, many times as a consultant, maybe brought into the organization by top management to design a solution, almost like if it were a product. Sometimes the solution was implemented, often not, many times applying coercion, and that works as much as coercion works in social systems. We know that social systems are counterintuitive, so that doesn't work. But this belief or this mental model was very much influenced by kind of systems engineering, that systems can be programmed, operations research, and the mental model is that the expert, of course, knows best. The second approach, which is second generation of design, is designing with others, dominant in the 70s and 80s. Decision makers bring the design expert as a consultant into the system, which then works with different kind of parts of the organization who then co-create a solution. This is very in line with what I do, kind of the with approach. This is kind of, I feel like, the most dominant still actually today. People in the system engage in kind of different activities. There's still the idea of the experts. There's various degrees of participation. And then there was this rejection of hard systems thinking, and soft approaches were kind of being introduced. Critical systems thinking, when you really try to challenge the boundaries of a system. Boundaries are social constructions depending on whose perspective you're involving. Boundaries, of course, are defined or redefined. And lastly, just to move towards the end, what I want to focus on today is the third approach, which is designing within the system. So here is where I think building the capacity in the system to engage in design, kind of in line with Banathy's vision, is super interesting. So he has some quite radical ideas, which are not common in design practices today, because he thinks it is the users, the people within the system, who are the design experts. It is not really ethical to design for others, or else they will design the systems that will ultimately condition life. So he has kind of this idea that we will always, that the people currently in power are too disconnected from the reality of citizens. So we need other types of organizations. So user designers are the co-designers of the systems that affect their lives. So in that sense, the social system must be designed by all those who are served by the system, who serve the system, and who are affected. So that creates this kind of co-designing community. And the benefits of group participation is sometimes more important than the solution itself, because as we know, in design processes, we work with a lot of uncertainty, and we do not know this kind of the design outcome before we engage in. And then he also talks about the role of professional designers. So professional designers in the short term can provide guidance to designing kind of the learning materials for the designing community. And in the long run, they can design or support with resources and learning systems that then the designing community can use on their own. So it's very much like a facilitator. And I know that, oh, I thought I had a section. Now I'm just going to bring you all to me, because I've introduced a lot of concepts. So I wanted to just pause a little bit and reflect about it, especially on this kind of third generation of design that Banathy outlines, where basically he talks about many things, but I wanted to just focus on these three things, which is, it is not ethical to design for others. We should kind of only engage in the systems that we serve or are served by or are affected by. And I wanted to just kind of understand if you agree or disagree, or this is a concept that's still kind of, yeah, not fully grasped, or it just feels kind of alien. And the same with the role of the professional designer to provide guidance on learning. So you can go ahead and just kind of position them. And if we need more post-its, you can just copy paste. I guess we're more people. So I can make 2 more rows. So the second one is the role of the professional designer to provide guidance and learning resources that the designing community can eventually use on their own. And the third one about group participation from the designing community is more important than the system being designed. So go ahead and then if you also want to explain why, you can just double click on your post-it and write about it. I love seeing how there's a good spread, but there is a lot of green ones on the far left. Would anyone want to share? Why this feels problematic, or people disagree? Maybe I'm just going to zoom in to read.
So I just wrote it on a post-it. I think that it can sometimes be beneficial if you are working within a system that you don't know a lot about, because then you might be able to spot blind spaces or blind spots that the people within the system don't recognize anymore or are not willing to change. And if you come from an outside, you can maybe take a more neutral perspective on the issues.
That's a super interesting perspective. Thank you, Deborah, for sharing. I agree with you. I think a lot of different perspectives are needed. But I also think that being so radical to say this, like Banathy said it, is to like overly emphasize the need of involving users, or kind of almost that the other roles or the other perspectives are supporting perspectives. Because ultimately, if we have the competencies to co-design the systems that affect our lives, they will be much more kind of contextually designed and much more, we won't have like cookie cutter solutions for everything, because we will be able to kind of build it from the ground up. But I think the blind spots, definitely, we all have them, and it's like the typical saying of like, fish don't realize that they can't see that they're inside water. Like it's impossible to recognize our assumptions and mental models many times without having other eyes on it. Great. It seems like the group participation one is quite kind of ambiguous. And there's a big kind of cluster in the middle in the red post-its. Maybe it requires more explanation, or does someone have any kind of particular question about it before I try to explain it? better? Okay, I think what it's almost, it kind of sounds obvious when you think about, let's say, like when you're building a design group. When you're building a group that can like a design group that can tackle different types of challenges, you kind of building the social system and the community around the people that can be prepared and equipped to tackle different challenges is more important than actually finding the combination of expertises to tackle a very, very specific problem, because then you have kind of this solution in mind ahead of the design process, if it makes any sense. So it's kind of building the capacity of the group to then be able to adapt to different design challenges, and then they will be able to seek out the expertises that they are lacking in order to address the types of challenges and solutions that you will face once you start the process. Because many times when you start kind of the other end, when you have a solution in mind, kind of quite upfront, and you build your team with that expertise to deliver on that solution, then you're creating a lot of blind spots because you haven't even done the research or the kind of understanding well what the challenges are, and what the solution space are before deciding on the solution, if it makes any sense. So it's also kind of radical because it puts kind of the design output secondary to the design process, but it's an interesting perspective for sure. Yeah, and I think a lot of people have talked about this. Enzio Mancini talks a lot about designers being kind of a midwife, almost like an intermediary role amongst different perspectives, and in the context of designing when everybody is designing. So Banathy is also kind of super supportive of the expert designer having kind of almost in like it's part of our like when doctors have their kind of professional ethics code, like as designers we also have to kind of make our knowledge share our knowledge, because design is kind of something that everyone can engage in to really participate in kind of co-designing what affects them. Thank you for sharing. I will bring everyone to me, and then maybe I think something happened with the transition, so I'm just gonna bring you here. Yes. Oh, yes, this here. So I'm gonna get even more theoretical before I become practical. I'm super sorry, we're going kind of a deep dive, but just wanted to share 4 key concepts, again, from Banathy, and his book is huge. So I'm saving you from, from quite a long read, but it's 4 key concepts from designing from within the system. And he talks about this design kind of building capacity to design as this kind of never-ending spiral that starts with, of course, a purpose. Why do we want to engage in design? And as we go through the process, we are kind of developing a design culture. We're creating our unique design culture. So this is not about kind of creating the design thinking or something that's universal, and expertise. And it all starts with creating your designing community, which includes, as I said before, all those who are served by a social systems, those who serve, and those who are affected. And they become this, what he calls the user designers. And that becomes the enabling system, like what we were talking about, group participation being more important than the system being designed. This is the designing system, the like what will enable any design. And they engage in a design inquiry. So it's quite similar to the typical kind of double diamond model, but he calls this the dynamics of design, which all kind of start in the middle of this kind of spiral, which is the space of knowledge, and all these arrows are kind of feedbacks and feed forward loops. But you first kind of explore the space and the boundaries of the systems that you want to change, articulate its core values, then you go into solutions, experimentation, and before you go into kind of a new model. But in that, when you're designing the new system, he thinks that, and he calls this the turning around, the turning the arrow around, that you can't really go from designing an existing system to the kind of what is a better ideal of what is existing, that you really need to transcend the mental models that have designed what we kind of live in today in order to design the ideal first. And from that ideal, you take a step back and design what he calls the most attainable version of the ideal, so the most realistic version of the ideal. But you need to take that loop, you need to go to kind of, and for that he wants to integrate different design qualities, different individual and collective qualities, systemic qualities, and community cultural qualities. So that is also a way to kind of really see the ideal. I know that this is all sounding very abstract. Sorry, there's something with my activities, maybe because I put them at the end, that they're not in the right order. So I just want to bring you here. Everyone see the screen now? So kind of similar to before, I just want you to kind of position these concepts to what seems kind of maybe most familiar or kind of less radical to what others and different kind of design approaches use today, or what feels more radical. And if there's any questions, just let me know, or you can just write it in the middle. Just position it in the middle and just write it and we'll address it. I forgot to say something about the design dynamics, the process, the one that's in how. He had his divergence convergence model before it was popularized in the 90s by the UK Design Council as the double diamond. And he talks about every single kind of relationship or line that is in between those boxes is kind of a convergence and divergence, because that's kind of a dynamic in design processes in general. Not that every process has these 4 stages and we once or twice kind of diverge and twice converge, but it's kind of, it's part of using different methods to become really analytical and open up, and then other methods to kind of close down and make decisions and converge. Wow, there is now a very big spread. I see one comment in one of them. Let me just read it. Oh, we had a similar course on this, and this one is the purple one. Would anyone want to share? This is the to what ends, the kind of, let's not make the most feasible version of the current, but let's really think about ideal possibilities to then kind of inform.
Yes, I put that post-it there because, well, the way I understood this task, I thought we were supposed to put what concepts are radical or less radical to us from a perspective that we have used them before, or we, okay.
It was perfect.
Okay, cool.
Yes, yes.
So I felt like this is less radical because we had a course on future scenarios and what if scenarios. So I felt like I kind of already knew a little bit about that concept, or at least in what direction it goes.
Cool, cool. Nice to connect it to kind of the foresight future scenarios work. Now I want to move into those who put it more on the more radical, because there's also a few blue boxes into that end, if anyone would want to share why it feels a bit more distinct or different. No, no one wants to share? It's fine. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, so I understand. And then there's a lot of, but maybe what would be helpful, if you want to kind of write why you have positioned your post-its where you put them, then I can read them, and then you can, because it will help. It will help me understand, because there's so many that feel like it's still ungraspable, and I understand, because I've had to read it a million times before understanding it. So if you want to write your question, then I can try to, unless anyone wants to jump in with a question or a comment. Yeah. So the user design, the question is, it's about the learning organization, which is the enabling system, not understanding the difference between the user designer and the kind of learning organization. It's because it's very different, it's very similar. When you're talking about the user designers, you're talking just about who they are, who is serving a system. Let's say it's someone working in a public service who is served by it. Let's say it's a patient. Let's say that the servant is a doctor, and the served is the patient, and the affected is the whole kind of the informal caregiving system that's around the patient as well. They are all part of being a user designer. And then the kind of the learning organization is that they become a co-designing community. They become the co-designing community that will develop their unique design culture and expertise to design, or to engage and participate in the design of the systems that are affecting their lives, if it makes any sense, if that clarifies it a little bit.
Just a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
So does that mean the user designers is literally like who is involved, but without actually involving them, just thinking about who, and then the learning organization is when you come to the point that you involve them during the design process?
Yeah, it's almost like if we take this realization that, let's say, us as design students, maybe we shouldn't, maybe, I'm not just saying but maybe we shouldn't design systems that are not affecting us. We should only engage on things that are And if we are coming in the role as a professional designer, as this kind of outsider view, but to support the designing community, which are the designers that will be affected ultimately. Because I think Banathy's realization is that there's so many things that are designed without contextual knowledge, that are designed by people super disconnected from reality, that never involve users. So let's just call it out. Let's say it's really not ethical to do it. And let's always make sure we involve, it's kind of the agency and the responsibility and accountability is on the designing community. And all the other perspectives are kind of a supporting role. So, for example, let's say my master thesis, I worked with, we were tackling kind of sexual violence in Oslo. If I haven't been affected by sexual violence, maybe it's not ethical for me to work on that project. It's kind of like if you take it to an extreme, that's kind of the sentiment, because I can work on it if my role is to really build a community or they are building a community and I will support them so they can have the kind of design competencies and knowledge and resources that they will design the systems that will affect people that are affected by sexual violence, if it makes sense. Yes, Claire, oh, sorry. I have two screens and now I don't know what I did.
I just wanted to share or maybe ask what your thoughts are on, like, if you are engaged in a system, it can also lead to challenges because you're emotionally involved and therefore you have certain biases. Yes. So there's somehow a contradiction between being involved and not doing bias research.
Exactly. So we were discussing this. Deborah brought a very similar point out earlier. I completely agree. And it's, as we were saying, it's impossible to see your biases and blind spots if you're so emotionally involved. Agreed. So many perspectives are needed, but it is kind of also important to involve as a person affected by whatever issue. It's important to kind of, and I'm not saying that this is not something, it's kind of like, I think these are quite radical thoughts that help us kind of think and provoke us. That's why I'm bringing them up. But maybe those emotional perspectives and biased perspectives are also unique experiences that are important to take into account. And it's also something about moving away from our mental model of we are here to help others and everyone's here to help others. It's almost like, well, maybe part of the solution is that the people that need help actually are the help. Kind of, it's kind of, if you understand what I mean. Thank you for all these. You're making me think really hard. This is really fun. And also, I don't have all the answers. I'm just trying to pull out some provocative kind of, yeah, thoughts so we can all kind of engage in the conversation, because it's super interesting, yeah, to kind of follow your reactions and your thoughts. Let's move on. I will try to bring you to the last part of the presentation, and I think we're really good on time since we have 15 minutes left. Let's just, sorry. I'll bring you all to me and I'll start the full screen mode again. I don't know why that happened, but it happened. Okay, here. Last bit. I wanted to share with you the case study of the fifth space. And this is a project I was working in Vancouver when I met Guille and Jorge. And here we were working with 3 different disability agencies and a social design organization called In With Forward to create a program to really kind of, as it says here, flipping the order in how services are made. So we wanted to start with people, with end users, build capacity in kind of all parts of a social service organization to redesign services, and through that learning and inform policy. So kind of instead of going from policy to services to people, is how can we try to design with from the other end. And this was a collaboration, as I said, with Forward. They're a super interesting group that you should check out. They have a decade of experiences in different countries, in Australia, UK, and the last 6 years they've been in Canada. And we work with 3 social service delivery agencies, Bocce, Possibilities, and Simon Fraser Community Inclusion. And these 3 organizations work with adults and children, but in this case, we were working with adults that experience cognitive disabilities. And this research was done from January to June 2015, so 6 years ago. And we created a program called Fifth Space, which was an interagency kind of social research and development program for these 3 agencies, where 1,500 staff across the agencies, that's kind of the total amount of people, but 80 of them applied to be part of the program, and 28 were selected to participate. And this program was a 6-month program to build the capacity to co-design, kind of like from the ground up. And we were with them for 1 day a week for 6 months. So it was a kind of a 20% of their time. They would be in a different space, learning and co-designing with different tools, and just trying to build this capacity from within. So similar to what we were talking about, that's me 6 years ago. I feel like a lot of things have changed. First of all, becoming a mother, I feel like my life was, completely turned around. But anyway, I was a facilitator in the learning program. I was a co-learner and a coach. And we started the program. So this, I said, it was every kind of Tuesday, 1 day a week for 6 months, by creating this co-designing community between those who serve. So in this case, all kind of different service providers, as we were seeing here, kind of there were like at the top level that we had middle managers, we had frontline workers, kind of we just wanted to have a diverse spread of people across the organizations. And those who are served, which are the end users that they see on a daily basis, which in this case was people who experienced cognitive disabilities, and the services that they offered were kind of cared facilities, group homes, and different programs. And one of the hard things to do this is we had a space in one of the organizations in Bocce. We had like a huge room where we of course had all learning modules, but we had like accessible materials to prototype and ideate. But one of the biggest thing, or one of the hardest thing for me, was to get them out of the room and do contextual ethnographic research. So we had them test ethnographic research on each other before they were kind of out in the streets learning about. So they had detected an opportunity area to find different types of employment services for people with disabilities. So we were looking at different kind of just doing research in different spaces. Also, another design tool that we were quite interested in supporting was to design the prompting tools to probe deeper into people's experiences. So sometimes when you haven't really, you're not so, it's very hard to ask people what their ideal is when they haven't experienced that ideal, or when they haven't been asked before. So by creating different probing tools or different kind of versions of what the ideal could look like, it's much more easy to tap into kind of those aspirations, dreams, wishes. So that was one of the tools that we were. Once they had their kind of opportunity spaces, they conceptualized and tested different ideas, first in kind of a very conceptual level. And then they all did live prototyping with users. And towards the end of the 6 months, there was 6 concepts that emerged. And I'm just gonna talk about one, which is called Ask a Dude. This is where the activities ended up, sorry. And this is the Ask a Dude team. Yeah, it was a very kind of, so they had representatives from all different agencies, which is super unique because they are agencies that compete for the same public funding. And to come together, to unite as a designing community, to say the status quo is not good enough, and we need to do something together to build, kind of infuse new methods and capacities is unique. So they were representing the 3 organizations and different kind of like roles within the organization. And they did ethnographic research with them, and Bobé, which is one of them, did these amazing drawings of the people they kind of learned about their lives. And they discovered an opportunity space that is rarely addressed by social workers in the disability space, which was about that staff don't know their employers' expectations or their clients' expectations when it comes to supporting sexualities. Consequently, accurate information is withheld and only presented in a kind of risk and safety context. So they addressed the opportunity space of kind of sexuality and well-being in the disability space. There are systemic barriers to relationships, and men are particularly left out of having conversations about sex and sexuality, which is it was a very, very interesting kind of space or pain points discovered. And then they had different kind of, they created different opportunity spaces you can read here. Yeah. And the concept that they created, the concept of Ask a Dude, is to turn sex and relationships from being a hidden topic of conversation to being the topic of conversation in a safe, enlightening, and fun way. So they brought in local comedians, actors, improv artists, and persons with disability, and they filmed people having frank chats about sex and sexuality, and they created kind of these watching parties, so then people could comment about it, which was super interesting because it's an opportunity space that came within the team, and then through this 6 months they prototyped it. They had their different kind of their theory of change, with like on the left is the things that they designed, and the intermediate outcomes that they were seeking, like improved sense of self-awareness, reduce stigmatization, have more comfort about these topics with staff, which would lead to kind of end outcomes, which is less shame, less problematic behavior, more pride, more healthy romantic relationships. I can see that my son just arrived, so it might get very loud in a second. Sorry about that. But anyways, they produced 11 of these videos, and 3 of them were actually taken then to train sexual health educators on issues to do with sexuality and cognitive disabilities. And the outcomes were more comfort and less shame, talking about sex, greater self-understanding, and a growing network of people that are safe to bring these questions into, which is amazing because the people that are serving and that are served by these systems are the main kind of actors and agents with agency in it, and we were just kind of the facilitators, which I think was super meaningful. So this is my last, I know we have 5 minutes left only, so I wanted to bring up the same kind of model as before, and I just wanted to hear your perspectives on how feasible or less feasible, or what is still super confusing right now as we went through this presentation. And we probably won't be able to engage in a full discussion now. So if you have any further comments, questions, want to discuss, yeah, feel free to just give my email and we can chat later.
Now we let them move the color seekers to see where we are. We have 4 minutes, so you have to do it quickly.
I maybe have a question. Yeah,
yes.
Just to hear from your experience, I just wonder, because you're working, I heard that you have experience working in the healthcare. Did you have the chance to work with both, for example, patients and physicians at the same group? Were there any challenges there? Because there is like power relations, and do you have any experience with that?
Yes, but I think when we are bringing groups like together to co-creative sessions, you're very aware of those power relations, but I think the intent, so everybody knows that the intent there is to kind of listen and share each other's perspectives. So you're almost kind of trying to eliminate those power dynamics that do exist. So it's impossible to eliminate them, but it's like almost kind of refocusing the purpose of why we are there. And it's because we need to listen. But that you brought the healthcare system, a colleague of mine at Mayo Clinic did for over 4 years a project looking at the woman's pregnancy journey, and she interviewed hundreds of women. She tried to demedicalize that experience by bringing a lot of the kind of equipment to the home that could be done by caregivers, and not kind of, because if you're pregnant, it's a sign that you're actually extremely healthy in most cases. So why would we have to go to a very kind of medicalized, centralized place when we can do a lot of the follow-ups at home? And then her reflections, she shared her reflections with me when, after she had gone through her own pregnancy experience, she's like, I thought I knew what they were experiencing. I thought I had empathy. Like, I interviewed so many, I was in their homes. It was just, but I had no idea of the fears, of the uncertainty of I even draw the journey as a roller coaster, but then I experienced it myself, and it was just like so radically different. That also makes me think about, like, can we really understand someone else's experience, no matter how many? So that's why I'm kind of interested in exploring what if they were involved, not just as a kind of the user that will give information to the system, but actually the agents that can redesign their experience. Is kind of interesting for me. Thank you, Noah, for that question, though. But yes, definitely many power dynamics involved. And I tried to do you can Google co-designing with relationships in mind. I tried to create a tool that would kind of materialize those power relations in complex systems by creating a shared vocabulary on what we mean by relationships. So like the relationships here are either made of stainless steel or cotton elastics or yarn, because we have a lot of associations to materials. We can put a lot of meaning into materials, but it's very hard to talk about relationship with that same level of kind of nuance. By using kind of different stringy or kind of materials to talk about relationships, and then you can position them in power dynamics, it is kind of a way that I found helpful to illustrate those power dynamics and that kind of more invisible dimension in social systems. Oh yeah, someone found it. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I want to stay. I'm having fun.
Do you have more questions? Because she has to go.
Yeah, time is a bit limited, but I just want to say it was very interesting, and I think it's a very good perspective to look at it, because we talk a lot about human-centered design, but then how far do you go, and what does it really mean? I thought it was quite interesting, but it would of course be an interesting topic also to, you could talk for hours about it probably, but time is a bit limited.
But please, if you have any further reflections or thoughts, it's kind of like, I was a little bit afraid of sharing this because I feel like I barely understand it, because many of things feel radical to me. So it would be nice just to start a dialogue about it. So please.
Maybe we do a repeat.
That would be cool. We can have a discussion, yeah, in a month or two.
Okay.
If things have reflected in the background, I would love that. I would really, really love that.
Good. And some of you have the link of Manuela's PhD thesis, so you can read her work in her document. Do not expect to do a PhD for a bachelor thesis, please. So be careful how you interpret in a thesis. Good. Thank you very, very much, Manuela. It has been fantastic.
Thank you.
I appreciate they're all thinking and reflecting. And for the one in the third year, there might be changing or reconsidering their approach. And for the one in the second and third year, there might be thinking, oh, maybe there is something I'm missing. Who knows? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
With your baby.
Yes.
And
thank you so much for this opportunity. And yes, we'll be in touch. Thank you, Mia, for the amazing invitation.
Thank you. And if the students want to stay for a minute to wrap up, that's okay. I'm staying. Thank you, Manuela.
Very nice to meet you all.